Welcome to How They Won. I'm your host, Bob Burns, and every week I get successful real estate professionals across North America to share their secrets of success with you. With everything going on in the world right now, I wanted to bring a timely topic to all of you. This week, we're talking about investing in real estate, both from a client perspective and from the perspective of a real estate professional. With all of the volatility in the world right now, the idea of signed leases with a predictable and stable cash flow sounds pretty appealing to me. Craig O'Rourke of Coldwell Banker Realty in Southern California came on the show to share his knowledge about working with real estate investors. Craig is a 25-year veteran of the real estate business and an expert in working with real estate investors. He wrote a book entitled Destination Perpetuity, The Real Estate Investor's Roadmap to Financial Freedom, and he has recently launched a course to help real estate agents become versed and comfortable working in the investment space. The course is called Learn It, List It, Sell It, and you can learn more about the course and purchase it at learnitlistit.sellit.com. Before we start the show, I wanted to share a thought with you all. As real estate professionals, we are leaders in our local communities. And in times like this, leaders like you have an opportunity to set the tone. So I'd like to encourage each of you to set the example in your community and do as Gandhi said by being the change you wish to see in the world. That being said, I want to thank you for listening. Now let's start the show. This week's episode is brought to you by Leaders Edge Coaching. Full disclosure, I am a trainer and a coach with Leaders Edge. But like you, I can choose to do business with anyone. But I choose to work with Leaders Edge. Leaders Edge has the right experience, knowledge, and tools to help you take your business to the next level. Whether that means closing more transactions, or improving your work-life balance, or building a team the right way, the coaches and staff at Leaders Edge can help you achieve your goals. For more information, email coaching@howtheywon.com. That's coaching@howtheywon.com. One thing I love about the real estate business is that there is almost an infinite number of ways to succeed. It's kind of like music that way. There's only 12 notes, but with those 12 notes, you can derive everything from Bach to John Coltrane to Metallica to Billie Eilish. Each of those artists took a structure that was already in place and did something new with it. My guest today is doing the same thing with the real estate business. He's found a way to combine the world of real estate investments and residential owner-occupied real estate into a new approach to the business that allows residential real estate agents to offer something brand new to their clients. I'm really proud to be working with this individual to help bring his idea to the broader real estate community. Craig O'Rourke has been in the real estate business for 25 years. He's worked as a sales associate, investor, manager, and is the author of the book Destination Perpetuity, The Real Estate Investor's Roadmap to Financial Freedom. In his various roles, Craig has overseen in excess of $1 billion in real estate transactions. His latest endeavor is a company called the Real Estate Success Series. So, Craig O'Rourke, founder and CEO of the Real Estate Success Series, welcome to How They Won.
Thank you. It's my pleasure to be here.
I'm so thrilled to have you on, and I want to dive right in if it's okay with you.
Absolutely. Let's get started.
Cool. When I was first getting my real estate license, one of my instructors used this analogy to help us distinguish real estate investors from real estate owner-occupiers, from non-investors, regular people, whatever you want to call them. And his analogy was sharks and guppies. The sharks were the investors and the guppies were the regular home buyers and home sellers. And in my state that I got licensed in Minnesota, there were different rules about working with each type of consumer. In our conversation today, we're going to be talking a lot about working with the sharks in this example. But before we get into any of that, Craig, you had the opportunity to swim with actual sharks when you were vacationing in Hawaii. What was that like?
Oh, it was fantastic. We had a full week in Hawaii during the Christmas holidays, and we had two adventures, and they were so different. The first one was in Waikiki Bay, where we just were able to swim with the sea turtles, an open water swim, which was just wonderful and had this beautiful romantic feel to it. And then the next day we went to the North Shore and we got into a shark cage, and my 12-year-old son just went crazy. I mean, it was just, and the sharks were coming up, bumping, they were chumming the water a little bit just to make it feel a little bit more intense. So it was, talk about swimming with the sharks. That was really the real deal. But I love your analogy of guppies and sharks too. I think it's perfect.
Cool. One of the real estate offices I used to manage, I'm not going to mention where, my wife fondly referred to it as the shark cage. So I totally get what you're talking about. So let's dive into the business side of the conversation, Craig. You've written a course to help real estate agents who have primarily worked on the residential single family side to transition and expand their business by working with investment properties. What drove you to do this? What was the spark that gave you this idea?
What was interesting? As you mentioned, I wrote a book a few years ago entitled Destination Perpetuity, and that book is to inspire really first-time investors, to explain to them how to get into the market and kind of help them determine whether or not they'd be a good fit for owning income-producing real estate. I work for Coldwell Banker, and Coldwell Banker had asked me to tour with a group they have called Wealth Builder. They go all around the country and they talk about how agents can build their own personal wealth. And while I was touring the country talking about my book and talking about building personal wealth, agents would come up to me after the presentation, and I heard time and time again, wow, I've always wanted to sell income producing real estate. How do you get into it? Do you need a separate license? Is there a class to do this? I heard this countless times in dozens of cities. And I thought, wow, there needs to be a class. So I decided to create one. And it took me about 3 or 4 years to put it together, but I'm pretty proud of it. I'll brag just a little bit. I live in California, and so I approached the California Association of Realtors with the class. They loved it. They're making it part of their educational system, and they've even created a certificate program around it. So it's going to launch next month in March, or actually this month. We're in March now. It's going to launch sometime this month, and any California agents that take it and pass the course will get an investment property specialist certification from the state of California.
Wow, that's awesome. Congratulations. I think getting the seal of approval from CAR is pretty big. If I'm not mistaken, they're the largest real estate board in the US, at least. Is that right?
You are correct. 1/7 of all real estate agents belong to CAR. So it's the top of the food chain. Well, there's NAR, of course, but yeah.
That's incredible. So now a huge swath of the real estate business is going to be exposed to this additional option that they can use to better serve their customers. Really, really cool. So let's kind of dig into this a little bit. For an agent that's interested in expanding into working with investors, what do you see, Craig, as like step one?
Well, step one is really understanding what the differences between income producing real estate and residential real estate. As I talk about in the course, everybody that has a real estate license is already licensed to sell income producing real estate. You already have the ability to do that, but do you have the skill set? So that's the difference. You have to understand that, the majority of what you do on a daily basis as a real estate agent, if you're going to sell an income producing property or a residential property, that it's not that different. There's just a different to-do list with it. So you have to understand some basics. There's a vocabulary that goes with it, of course, and you have to understand not just the vocabulary, but really what does a term like a cap rate mean? So you have to understand what cap rates are, what gross multipliers are, and why these numbers are, these calculations are important, and how you derive the value of a property. When you can start really understanding how the money flows, the cash flow works through a property, and you can understand and articulate that, then you can have that conversation with your clients and show them how they can really build true wealth. The cool byproduct about most agents that end up selling this is they end up buying income producing real estate themselves. And, I don't know if you know this, but when I've been touring with this wealth builder group, we go to different metros around the country, and the roadshow always opens with a very interesting question to the crowd. And the question is, how much do you think the average real estate agent in the United States retires with net, not including the value of their personal residence? The answer is shocking. It's $10,000 net. That's a shocking number. So, here we are working in the real estate industry. We're working with millions and millions of dollars, money flying all over the place, yet we're not grabbing enough of it for ourselves. So in writing this course and creating this course, I wanted to do two things. I wanted to introduce the real estate agents into how they can create a new stream of business for themselves, but also how they can create their own retirement, their own better future. We should all be retiring in a comfortable manner where we're not worried about, hey, is Social Security going to be around? Am I going to outlive my money? What's inflation going to look like when I'm 80 years old? See, income producing real estate, if you buy it right and you get in early enough, you won't have to worry about this because it just flows with the market. It's a beautiful investment if you do it right. So I created a course that will show people how to do it right.
I think that is an incredible service to the industry. And you're right. It is really, really sad that we see agents that would like to retire from this business, but they're just financially incapable of it. And fast forward there, we've got a 95-year-old real estate professional hosting an open house. Now, I'll grant you that there are 95-year-old real estate professionals I know that love this so much. It's not about the money for them. It's about keeping active and engaged in the business. And it's awesome. But I think people should be working to put themselves in a position so they can make the choice about whether to work that far into their life rather than being painted into a corner and being forced to do that. So kudos to you. And I always love talking to people that are giving something back to the industry. And it seems like you're doing that with the course. But I have a question. Real estate agents I talk to everywhere seem to have math phobia. They can calculate 6% okay, but any other calculation, real estate agents tend to break out in hives. And those couple of vocabulary words that you threw out makes me think of math. I've had the opportunity to preview your course, Craig, and I think you've made it easy, but I know you've had a lot of conversations around the arithmetic of investment properties. What are some tips to help agents get in the right headspace about that?
Well, the math is, listen, I was a solid C student in math my whole life, but I absolutely have this stuff down because it's just formulas. It's just strokes of keys on the keypad. So, as long as you have accurate information to start with. So in other words, let's just talk for a minute about a gross rent multiplier. That's a term. First time I heard gross rent multiplier, I wanted to cry. It sounded really complicated to me. And I thought, oh my gosh, I'll never be able to figure this out. And then I found out it was the easiest calculation in the world. All you really do is you take the price or the value of the property and divide it by the gross scheduled income. How simple is that? That gives you your gross rent multiplier. That is one of, and all of the calculations throughout my course are that simple to calculate because we don't have to dive as deep as an accountant. We're not CPAs. We're not supposed to be going that deep anyway. All we're really talking to people about is cap rates, gross rent multipliers, vacancy allowance, things like this that are such simple calculations. And if you go into almost any MLS and you open it up and you look at residential income property, you'll see a schedule that will usually break everything down for you. Your purchase price, down payment, your gross operating income, your vacancy allowance. And if you just look to see how these numbers fall out, as long as the information that the listing agent has provided the correct information, calculating each and every one of these numbers is the simplest thing you can do. You can just do a Google search and find out how to calculate each one of these, and everybody on the planet can be an expert in about 10 minutes.
I think that's fantastic. But why is gross rent multiplier, for example, why is that an important calculation? What does that help an investor do?
Yeah, that's interesting. So there's different ways that different investors will look at properties. So some people want to know cash on cash. Some people want to know gross rent multiplier. Some people want to know cap rate. I personally, the gross rent multiplier is kind of like a shotgun blast on how to look at valuation, because it's such a simple calculation, right? You only need two things. You only need to know the value of the property or the asking price, and you need to know the gross scheduled income. That gives you a gross rent multiplier. Well, what does that allow you to do? That allows you to quickly look at 100 buildings at the same time and see if they're all priced accordingly, right? So that gives you a value, a basic value of where this particular property will be. I personally don't like the gross rent multiplier as my valuation gauge. I like the cap rate. Why? Because unlike the gross rent multiplier, the cap rate takes into consideration also the expenses on the property. So it gives you a much more accurate view of what the return is actually going to be. So there's and some people want to look at cash on cash. Some people want to look at different types of valuations because each investor has a different viewpoint of a building and how they're going to. But typically people in the industry, professionals and investors, tend to talk in cap rates because that's basically your return on your investment, if you will.
That totally makes sense. Now, from a property valuation standpoint, in residential resale, we often use the comparable sales approach to valuate a property. What do homes, as similar to the home we're trying to put a value on, what do those homes sell for? Do we do the same thing in the investment world, or are we using the cost approach or the income approach or a combination of all three?
Yeah, it's interesting. They all come into account. So you're always, what's our number one rule in any real estate? Location, location, location. Right? You always want to look at location. You're always going to consider the condition of the property. You're always going to consider in income producing real estate. You're also going to look at the vacancy allowance of the property, see how that's operating. But at the end of the day, it's the cap rate. So, when we do price per square foot with residential, right? We look at something, it's like, okay, this property is $472 price per square foot in this neighborhood. And you have sort of it's not exact number, right? Because no two properties are exactly alike, but it's an average. And so you have that idea in your brain. Well, with cap rates, that's where you're looking at, because really with a cap rate, what you're saying is, what is my investment going to return to me? Because the difference, one of the main differences of buying residential real estate compared to buying income producing real estate is when you buy income producing real estate, you're buying a business. So how much money is that business going to return? So that's one way to look at it. The other way people look at it is what's called value add. So in other words, this building right now that I'm looking at, let's say for fun, our building is a 5.5 cap. Right. But we look at the building, we're like, well, this building's in disrepair and the vacancy allowance out of control. Their expenses are out of control. I believe that if I went in and I fixed the building up and I started getting a handle on the expenses and this and that and the other, I could probably raise that cap rate from 5.5% to 7% pretty quickly. Well, that's what's called a value add. So when we look at income producing real estate, we're looking at how much money it brings in and potentially how much it could bring in the future. That's called pro forma.
That makes a lot of sense. And for the real estate broker owners that are listening to this podcast, what you just described, Craig, sounds a lot like when we're going to decide how to acquire a real estate brokerage and fold them into our brokerage. We look at two ratios, among other things. We look at an internal ratio and an external ratio. And the internal ratio is what the is what the company is doing now, and the external ratio is what the numbers would look like under the environment of the acquirer. So totally makes sense to look at investing in real estate as the acquisition of a business and apply both sets of overlays to it, your own and the old owner's overlays, to get a sense of whether that's a worthy investment. Really smart stuff. I want to kind of shift a little bit because I talk to a lot of agents that can sometimes be intimidated by working with investors. And in reading through your course, Craig, the story you tell about the first real estate investors that you helped could not have been more the opposite. Would you mind sharing the story of your first investment clients just in a concise way with everybody listening? Because I think it was trial by fire, but it was also some really patient and supportive customers that you had.
They really were, they were great. And, when they came to me, Joe and Joanna, and they first came to me, young married couple, and they wanted to get started in real estate investing. And the funny thing was when they approached me with the idea of buying income producing real estate, I said, I have to confess, I've never sold an income producing real estate before. And they said, well, we've never bought it before. Let's figure this out together. And I said, okay, let's do it together. And it really was trial by fire. We went through every single scenario you could think of what could go wrong, did go wrong. But the beautiful end of the story is they were my clients for over 20 years. I probably sold them, gosh, I don't even know, maybe 8 or 10 properties over the years. And through just watching the market as we go and kind of watching their portfolio every 6 months or so, I'd review their portfolio, and every once in a while I'd say, you know what, I think you might want to consider selling this particular property and doing a 1031 tax exchange, because this area has, the cap rate has changed such that your cash flow is rather light, and if we move you to a different area, I'm going to increase your cash flow. Long story short, one of them was they both had kind of great full-time jobs, but not jobs that were going to retire them anytime soon. They ended up retiring very, very well in their 40s with a house on the water up in Ventura County, California. And, I got a phone call from my client. He said, hey, I want to tell you, I'm sitting on my 40-foot Hatteras right now outside of my own boat dock. And he said, I just got to say thank you, because this would have never happened if we hadn't listened to you. Now, it was the perfect storm, because he and his wife were the perfect clients, and they really listened, and we learned together, and we grew it together, and we're still friends today over 25 years later. But it was an amazing journey, and I've been able to do that for my family, and for literally dozens and dozens of clients over the years, and it's very satisfying to look back on my career and see how many people are really in some strong financial stead because of the skill set I acquired over the years. And I'm proud to have put it together in a course, and hoping many other agents will be able to do this for their clients and for their families.
I think it's incredible the way that you've been able to touch people's lives, and we'll leave a little cliffhanger out there for folks, because Craig, you lay out, it may have been accidental with your first investment client in acquiring them and helping them through the process, but you've done a fantastic job in your course of taking that journey and laying it out into a simple, repeatable way that the folks taking your class can implement into their business and immediately uncover potential investors that are already in their sphere of influence and help start changing lives. So you got to take the course to learn this stuff that Craig is talking about. It's really, really good stuff. Let's shift gears again, though, if that's okay. From a marketing perspective, what should the average real estate agent be doing in order to help them reach investors? Is it sending form letters? Is it participating in internet forums? Like, where can agents find real estate investors, and how do they connect with them?
Yeah, well, in my course, one of the things I start with in my course is just farming from within. Every time, I believe that every single piece of real estate that gets sold is an investment. And I think anybody that's ever bought or sold real estate would agree to that. When you first help a client and they go to buy their first home, and what are they thinking about? They're thinking, oh my gosh, we're going to raise our kids here. We're going to do all these wonderful things. We got this beautiful home, and our life's going to get started. And then you get that phone call 5, 10, maybe 15 years later, and they're said, hey, it's time to sell. And you go in and you sit down to take that listing, and what happens? There's very melancholy. They're like, oh, I can't believe we're selling our home where we raised our kids and all this stuff. Well, guess what? When you come back again with that closing statement, everything changes. They're no longer heartbroken homeowners anymore. They're hardcore investors, and they want to know how much money they made off their investment, right? So my point is, every time we as real estate agents are chosen to help someone buy or sell a home, we are being given the opportunity to help them with what is arguably the biggest investment of their lives. So when we take that to the next step and we show them how to invest in income producing real estate, it's so easy to farm right from within your own sphere. So what I encourage people to do is think about who in your sphere might be a good candidate for income producing real estate. My class, in the first part of my class, goes through a series of exercises where you can kind of help pinpoint who would be a good candidate for income producing real estate. And when you just start letting people know that you are selling income producing real estate, it's miraculous what happens. I ended up, after about a year or so selling income producing real estate, I changed my elevator speech from the very mundane, I sell real estate, to the much more intriguing, I build portfolios, because that's what I was doing. And suddenly everybody wanted to know about, how do I get into it? Everybody wants passive income, right? Mailbox income. Everybody wants it, but they don't know how to do it. If you're the person, if you're that man or that woman that can create passive income for them, clients will flock to you, especially the ones who have already entrusted you with the purchase or sale of their number one asset, their home. The other thing I like to do sometimes is put together little seminars, informational seminars. Sometimes I'll do like a fundraiser for my kids' school or something like that. And those types of things really, really help. But just getting your name out into the community with your new skill set. I live in Southern California. You throw a rock, you're going to hit 3 realtors, right? They're everywhere. But not very many of them sell income producing real estate. And I'll share a little secret with you here on your show. What do you think where do you think 40% of my business comes from?
Your sphere?
No, from inside my office, from other agents coming up to me going, hey, Craig, I've got this client that wants to buy a duplex and I don't know anything about it. Can you help me out? Look at how much business we're giving away. Do you know that 17% of all sales in the United States last year were investors? Each and every real estate agent that is not selling income producing real estate is losing 17% of their own client's business to somebody else.
That's an incredible statistic. Very, very powerful. So I think you just got a lot of people's attention, and we'll plug the course again and how they can find it at the end of the interview. But I want to go back to working with investors, because a lot of times it can be very competitive. Investors are numbers driven. The numbers just have to work. It's not about as much falling in love with the property. It's about, do these numbers work for what I want to get out of this property after I put into it whatever I have to put into it, which can sometimes put a little extra pressure on the realtor trying to earn a full fee in their business. Do you have any advice to help agents earn what they're worth and still work with investors?
Excuse me. Absolutely. It's so important to get really what you're worth. And, it's so important not to dilute the industry. When you sell income producing real estate, what you're doing, again, you're selling somebody, typically a business. I find that with income producing real estate, I almost never am challenged about commission. But when I sell a home, I almost always am challenged about a commission. It's looked at differently. It's looked at as a higher skill set, I believe. And in a way, it sort of is. It's not a higher skill set. It's a different skill set. It's a unique skill set that most people don't have. So I don't usually have that issue with it, but with income producing real estate, with residential real estate, what I do when I'm challenged about my commission, I will do the old pie chart and I'll show where every single dollar goes, and I'll show why I'm not going to discount my fee. Because let's say the fee is $10,000. They think you're getting the whole $10,000. So I immediately start with the pie chart and I say, okay, my brokerage is getting, I never say me, my brokerage is getting $5,000. The other brokerage is getting $5,000. Then I show how I split with my brokerage, and then I show my expenses. And when I break all those dollars down, I rarely have anybody coming back after that saying they still want a discount. And if they do, then I explain to them, I'm not a discount broker. I don't discount my services, and I recommend they go somewhere else. I don't really fight it too much, because if you get somebody like that that's really going to fight it at that point, you are going to lose, in my opinion, because they're only focused on the commission. And I don't want to spend my time and my energy with those people. And more power to them. If they want to go and if they think it's all about the commission. Now, I've got a lot of agents in my office that will go through the whole thing and they'll show statistics about how discount brokers get less money and all that. I think those things are very good as well, but not my style. What I typically do is I explain to them, listen, I'm bringing 25 years of experience to the business and over $1 billion worth of transactions. I mean, if you don't see value in that, you got to go somewhere else. I don't really have the conversation because I kind of shut the door on it right away. I'm like, here's my value. Here's why I'm worth this. Let's move on. And that's kind of, it usually works.
That's the easiest way to do it. The best way to handle an objection is to never allow it to become an objection in the first place. So you come out strong with a plan and a structured process, and often you can help things go the direction you want it to. So a lot of agents that are listening to this, Craig, want to get involved with owning their own portfolio of rental properties. You talked a little bit about that before. What's some advice? There's some additional complications if you're going to be a licensee investing in residential real estate. What advice do you have for licensed real estate professionals getting involved in purchasing and owning investment real estate?
So you mean just for themselves, owning it for themselves?
Yep, personal investments.
Yeah, well, as professionals, industry professionals, there's always more liability just on us, right? The first thing I really, really push for everybody, whether they're representing themselves or somebody else, when you first get started with this, get a mentor. My class will tell you all the basic nuts and bolts of what you need, but real estate is a very regional business. You have to understand the market you're working in. You have to understand the local rules and local norms of what you're doing. So I can't stress enough the idea of having some type of mentor. It may even be your manager, but ideally it's somebody who is the known professional in your community, and be generous. Offer to split the deal with them for their expertise, because they'll walk you through a lot of pitfalls. There's, and the other advice I would give is really understand the material. I said earlier, we were talking about cap rates and gross rent multipliers. And I said, as long as you have accurate information, the calculation's easy. But how do you know you have accurate information? These are the sort of pitfalls, because we're dealing with a lot of money. And I'll go on the MLS so many times when I'm looking for a transaction for a client. And there's a column in most MLS that will say cap rate and gross rent multiplier. And so you can just scan all of these properties. And in my area, an average cap rate is maybe 4 to 5%. Suddenly I'll see an 8% cap rate. And I'll think, wait, what is this? And the minute I go in, I realize the agent has put the numbers in completely wrong. Didn't know what they're doing. Now, who's that a liability for? Well, it's liability for the agent, certainly. It's also a liability potentially for the seller. And guess what? It's a liability for the buyer's agent. If they sell them that property, telling them it's an 8 cap and it turns out to be a 4, and oh my gosh, they just put all this money in, they're upside down on their loan, they're losing money like crazy, they end up losing the building. These things happen. So you have to really understand what you're doing before you really start representing yourself or somebody else. So I truly, truly think a mentorship program is the most valuable thing you can do. And believe me, if you get mentored on 1 or 2 or certainly 3 deals, you'll have it down, and you won't need any more help. But those couple of dollars that you'll give back to your mentor is money well spent and will probably help you keep your license.
And I found that agents who are doing this, who are investing for themselves and working with other investors, seem to be very, very much willing to share and mentor you. Right when I got into real estate in my office in South Minneapolis, there was this guy named Marvin. And Marvin was one of the most successful real estate investors I've ever met in my life. And he was willing to take any of us under his wing. I started asking Marvin questions, and he started explaining to me pre-war versus post-war houses and why some are an advantage and what neighborhoods to look for and what pockets to invest in. And here I am, like, if I took all of his advice, I'm a competitor. I'm trying to go after the same pool he is, but he was super generous. And I found that to be the case with almost all real estate investment professionals, is they're totally willing to share, and may the best investor win. Have you found that to be the case in your even more competitive Southern California market?
Absolutely. I've always come from the feeling that we are in a business of abundance. There is so much out there, and I really don't think there's much competition for the agents that work hard. I mean, we have our business. Our business is tough because it's very demanding. We have to be very focused, but there's so much out there, and anybody who's willing to get up every morning and get out there and all you have to do is go by the ABCs, right? And do everything we all know that you're supposed to do. As long as you do that, you will make a beautiful living every time. There's no shortage of business, especially in income producing real estate. You know what's their shortage of an income producing real estate? Agents. There's not enough agents selling it. So your friend, Marvin, I think his name was, he knew that you could come on and 10 other people could come on or 100 other people come on, and there's still plenty to go around.
Yep. So I think that's a great place to wrap up. Craig O'Rourke, founder and CEO of the Real Estate Success Series. We really appreciate sharing everything that you've shared today. We're going to post links to your website, all your social media accounts on the show notes at howtheywon.com so people can easily find you, and they should be on the lookout for your course coming soon. Any other place that you want to drive folks listening to, Craig, so they can find you?
Oh, no, that's fantastic. I so much appreciate my time. I love being on the show with you. I hope you have me back some other time. It's been a really fun event.
Excellent. Thank you, Craig. And thanks for listening, everybody. We'll catch you next week.